and welcome to the League of Women Voters of the San Juan Islands monthly meeting. Today our program is update out for the Islanders, and thank you to our panelists for sharing a part of your very busy days. Our meetings are always open to the public, and if you're interested in joining, we have brochures on the back for you to fill out and join us. For those of you who have not attended a League of Women Voters meeting before, welcome, and I hope you'll consider joining. The League is a nonpartisan organization whose purpose is to promote the informed and active participation of citizens in government. As an organization, the League does not support or oppose candidates for public office. However, the League does support issues and initiatives that have been agreed upon by a consensus of the membership for study and action, and we'll talk about a few of those. The League, for a few housekeeping things, the League is staffing a voter registration table at San Juan Island Cheese on Saturdays, market days, between 10 and 12, and if anyone would like to help out with that, I've got a sign-up sheet in the back also. And we need volunteers for the July 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th. Last but not least, the 4th of July parade is coming up, and you are welcome to march with the League. The only requirement, you have to be able to walk and wear red, white, and blue. There's no floats to fix. There's no costumes to hunt down. We keep it very simple. We have a banner, we have signs, and that's pretty much it. So it's easy and it's a lot of fun. There will be no membership meetings in July and August. However, on September 10th, our membership program will focus on the real estate excise tax. I don't think I can say that fast. It's also called a REIT, R-E-E-T. And it's this initiative will be on the ballot in San Juan County, and the purpose of the tax is to provide funds for affordable housing. Also in the back, Patty Otley is here. Patty, raise your hand. Okay. She's got petitions available with her today for Initiative 1639, Safe Schools, Safe Communities. She will also supply petitions to anyone who is interested in collecting signatures. Time is of the essence because the signatures have to be in by the end of this month in order to qualify for the November ballot. And this is a gun safety initiative, and Patty will be happy to talk to you a little bit about it. Those of you who were at the annual meeting luncheon last month, she was our keynote speaker talking about her advocacy group, Grandmothers Against Gun Violence. So now this is one of the initiatives that the State League and all of the local leagues are supporting this year. And Sarah, Sarah, would you step up to the plate?
Okay. Hi and welcome. I'm Sarah Crosby, and I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers today. Last year, the League took a look at how various agencies and policies might be affected in the light of the change in the federal administration and the anticipated agenda of both the administration and Congress. Notably among these changes were proposed tax cut, possible changes in the Affordable Care Act. In addition, the administration's choices to lead cabinet departments signaled many possible changes in public policy, which would almost certainly affect us here in the county. With regard to education, affordable housing, health and human services, and environmental regulations. And now a year has passed. Some changes have been made and others have been stalled or scrapped. There are still many measures being talked about at the national level which will affect us here in the county. We thought, therefore, that it might be useful to check in with some of those who spoke to us last year, and perhaps one or two additions. We've gathered many familiar faces to talk to you today about what has taken place in their spheres in this last year and what might be anticipated in the near future. I hope you've brought your paper and pens or pencils so as to note your questions that you might have. Our format today is to have each of our speakers give you their perspective before we open the meeting to questions. So please hold your questions until everyone has spoken. Now for the fun. With us are Duncan Wilson. Duncan has been the town administrator of Friday Harbor for the past 6 years. He had previously served as the city administrator of North Bend, Washington, and as deputy city manager in Covington, Washington. He is a graduate of Western Washington University with a degree in business administration and is also a graduate of the University of Puget Sound School of Law. He was in private legal practice for 22 years before entering public service in 2004. In addition to his day job, Duncan currently sits on the board of the trustees of the San Juan Community Theater, among his many other community involvements. We also have Jennifer Armstrong. Jennifer has served as director of the San Juan Island Family Resource Center since 2013. Before moving to San Juan Island, she worked in a range of health and social service and educational positions. She began her professional career in New York City, working with homeless populations in the Bowery, followed by time as an art therapist and psychiatric case manager at Mount Sinai St. Luke's Hospital, and later as director of children's services for Hartley House, the oldest social services center in Times Square. After relocating to the West Coast, she spent 12 years at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, developing and directing a nationally recognized arts and music therapy department. She holds a BA in psychology from UCLA and an MA in clinical arts therapy from New York University. At the Family Resource Center, she particularly enjoys working with a diverse range of clients, collaborating with other local agencies, and using creative approaches to developing programs and services that meet the needs of our unique island community. Lincoln Borman has served as director of the San Juan County Land Bank since 2005. In that time, the Land Bank and partner organizations have conserved over 4,000 acres in the archipelago. He also serves as chair of the steering committee for the Terrestrial Managers Group, which helps to coordinate resource management activities among federal, state, local, and nonprofit organizations. In addition, he is chair of the Stewardship Network of the San Juans and serves as secretary of the Washington Wildlife and Recreation Coalition, which advocates for statewide funding for conservation and recreation land acquisitions. Lincoln holds a doctorate from Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies and a master's in environmental policy from the University of Minnesota. We also have with us Alexis Freddy, who has spoken to us before, as has everybody. Alexis has been serving as superintendent of San Juan Island National Historical Park since February 2016. Prior to coming to San Juan Island, she worked in Yosemite National Park for the better part of 15 years. Her primary professional emphasis has been in environmental planning and compliance and project management, both of which require skills in strategic planning, project management, team building, public involvement, employee development, and collaborative action planning. Since her arrival to the park, she has been focused on many needed operational needs, chief among them employee housing. And she's also been involved in planning for a new visitor center at American Camp, among her many other responsibilities and goals. And lastly, we have John Guyman with us. John is a professor emeritus of the Department of Family Medicine at the University of Washington, where he served as chairman from 1976 to 1990. He practiced in rural communities for 13 years, including 7 years as a family physician at the Inter-Island Medical Center here in Friday Harbor. He has been editor of journals of family medicine for 30 years and has written 15 books about healthcare in the United States over the last 40 years. His most recent book, Crisis in U.S. Healthcare, Corporate Power versus the Common Good, recently won a silver medal in the national competition of the Independent Book Publishers Association. Yay, Dawn. And last month, he published a 32-page pamphlet, Common Sense, U.S. Healthcare at a Crossroads, in the 2018 Congress, and is currently working on a new book about Trump care to be released in September. For those of you wishing to read John's works, they're here at the library, but also for sale at various venues around the island. Thank you all so much for coming. And with that, I think we'll begin with you, Duncan. Get your perspective.
Thank you. I remember in the old days going to rock festivals that would start like at noon and go till midnight. And the opening act that would always come in was always some unknown band of little import. Here I am. I wanted to just take a kind of a 5,000-foot overview of how things are. I'm going to opine a little bit, which means it's worth exactly what you paid to get in here. I think we have an interesting job. It's the greatest job ever. I wouldn't trade this for anything, even on its bad days. And one of the benefits is they kind of hand over the reins to you and give you a jewel, a gem. And then your idea is, when they walk in the door, they tell you, don't screw it up. So that's what my job has been, is to find a way to clean it, grow it, improve it, but don't, for God's sake, screw this place up and keep what we have. There's always an argument about what you do to keep the place the way you want it. And I think one of the biggest challenges that I found, sort of off the radar, but still the biggest challenge, is that we can't allow ourselves to become Nantucket or even Leavenworth. We don't want to be the place that has kitschy shops that are all related around a Bavarian theme. As beautiful it is to go there in the winter, I love it, but you can't turn it into a circus because it has its own natural beauty, and it's an honest beauty that's here. So I walk a tightrope every day between suggesting new changes and modifications, the things to do, while still not allowing myself to screw it up. Doesn't mean we always make the right decisions, but we try to walk on that razor blade all the time to make sure that we keep it where we want it to be. And in not wanting to become Nantucket, one of the biggest issues I think we found is that you can't have a healthy, real, honest community without having a proper mix of people of different ethnicities, of incomes and interests. And we are not at a crisis point, but we are certainly looking down the barrel of what could be a problem in the future when it comes to housing. I was very, very lucky to have worked with Mark Tompkins from the County Health Department, who led up a group of us that got together to try to figure out what are the housing issues. And we kind of came down to like 5 different types of housing that were needed. But the one that appeared to be the most pressing on a short, long term, and would have the most impact on the community was that of worker-based housing. So we are trying to find places that, we'd love to bring up. There's people that want to become nurses and move to the island that have nowhere to move to. Teachers have nowhere to move to. Firefighters. The list goes on and on of people that would be coming here, taking honest, good, hardworking, great-paying jobs, but can't find a place to live. So it is incumbent upon us to assist the private sector in any way that we can by providing laws and assistance as best we can to make sure that housing is available. That doesn't mean that low-income housing isn't important as well. We have found that there's a number of these HUD apartment complexes that are rent controlled for 20 years, then they fall off and they become available for sale. The first one that happened with, we lost it. We didn't move fast enough. There was nobody in the community that was aware of it. And since then, the next one that came up was purchased and will be kept as low income by an organization that stepped into the fold. More will be coming, and we have to be ready to take care of those to maintain low income housing where it belongs. So worker housing, low income housing. The other one, I guess, is people should, the idea of home ownership these days. I have 2 kids that are no closer to being able to buy a house down in the Seattle area than I am to buy a place in Beverly Hills. There's just no way it can happen because everything is just too expensive. So we need to find ways to create single-family residential housing that's affordable. Great work being done by Homes for Islanders, which has a special niche. Great work being done for the Home Trust, which has another niche. They do it a different way. But all in all, it's providing homes for people that want to have their own place. So that my push right now, at least in the home field, is to make sure that we have housing for people that are coming in, and that we don't become Nantucket, where the workforce shows up on the ferry every morning because the only people that can afford to live on the island are in multi-million-dollar homes, and someone forgot to, take care of everybody there, so that you have the people that work in the community live in the community. Preservation, we have, changing subjects a little bit, I'm just sort of hitting some of the big ones. In preservation, we're attempting to maintain the look and feel of the town. The Historic Preservation Review Board takes in and reviews applications that come in. Probably one of the most interesting ones lately is a hotel on First Street that wants to build in the empty lot there, which has gained a lot of people's attention. And part of their job is going to be to make sure that whatever is built there does in fact meet the character of the town, not only in design but in bulk and density and in scale to those places around it. Infrastructure has been probably my personal pack to carry around here. Water, sewer, and stormwater, we had massive problems that needed to be fixed. We have, every time we've touched a street, we've tried to go underneath the street and fix what's underneath it so that we have it for good for another 20 to 40 years. The reason why Tucker is taking so long, and I'm sure I got some tomatoes thrown at me later, but Tucker's taking so long is because we did the water and the sewer and the stormwater underneath there and had to get all those, then we had to reconnect all the side connections all the way up. And then when we were done with all that, they have to come in and build a new road bed, build new sidewalks, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, and a completely new traveled portion. Hopefully it'll look a lot like the first phase of Tucker when it's all done. It'll be one continual run out, and it will be something we have to look forward to for the next 100 years. Not that there won't be repairs between then. When I got here, King Fitch told me that there were 2 projects that I was going to have to face that probably would not do during the time because of money and complexity. One was getting Tucker done, and the other one was building a water transmission line from the lake back into town, which is about 5.5 miles of pipe. But we're almost done with Tucker, and we finished the water transmission line. It was that was a tough one. We had a budget of close to $10 million on that, and by some magic and trickery, we actually came in at $6.5 million to finish that. We obtained a low interest 2.25 interest loan to build that from the USDA, and it's being repaid on a 40-year basis. And normally I wouldn't be a fan of having a 40-year amortization, but the deal is, why should everybody living here now be the one responsible for complete repayment of that water line when it's going to be good for 90 years? So we put it out over a longer period of time so that we spread out the cost amongst everybody, and so far we have not had to raise the price of water other than just the adjustments that happen annually. So that's a big deal. Infrastructure, in addition to that, we have roads, sidewalks, parks. The pocket park that we built down there was, first of all, to help with some safety issues. Secondly, to help promote the entranceway into Sunshine Alley. And third was to have a sense of place in downtown. If you ask me now, and this is my personal opinion, if I had to put my finger on where's the center of Friday Harbor, I'd put my finger on that park now, which was sort of the idea behind it, was to find that sense of place where everybody knew it was uniquely and completely Friday Harbor. From how we're running, we have had record revenues. As everybody knows that tried to drive through town on Memorial Day, we have a lot of tourists. And they continue to come back. The Visitors Bureau that we helped fund, right now we're making sure that the Visitors Bureau is now funding less for summer visitation because we're full. And they're being asked to fund things in the shoulder season, spring and fall, as well as some packages to bring people here during the winter. Spread it out over the year. Don't try to pack any more people in here during the summer. It's just we only have so much infrastructure, one of which is employees that can serve the people that do come here because they don't have any housing. It's like wherever you push on this balloon, it bulges out somewhere else. But as far as we are in good shape financially in the town, and we're very thankful for those tourist dollars, so that sales tax is really what keeps us running. And last, I want to make a mention of something that's really different from where I got here to where I am now, is our relationship with the county. Every time you have Big Brother County and Little Brother Town around, there's always going to be brotherly relation problems of wrestling on the couch too close to all the glassware. But for the most part, we have taken a relationship that was probably pretty broken and have formatted it into something where we have learned to share, we've learned to work with each other, and to minimize the costs for everybody by utilizing each other's services and on a contract basis to make things work. We hire the county, of course, for our police services through the sheriff's office. We also use them for prosecution services, for court services, and it works very well for us, and we don't duplicate efforts, and it's better for the taxpayers overall. So as far as the state of the community, I will close with saying that my biggest goal was don't mess this thing up, keep it clean, keep it new, make it safe, make sure you have your water and your sewer, everything you need, and then add on special touches as you go to try to make it a better place to live for all of us. Because number one, this isn't for the tourists entirely. This is also for us. And if we can't be proud of our own place, there's no sense in doing the rest of it. So, thanks very much. Did you want questions now or at the end?
No, at the end. We'll have everybody say.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan.
Okay, on to social services. It's fun times these days for social services. I thought what I would do is talk a little bit about what the 2019 federal budget proposal is and how it impacts social services, and sort of compare it then to what we're doing and seeing at a local community level. As you may guess, there's a real difference there in approaches to things. So I'm going to just kind of run through some of the basic things that households in our communities need access to be healthy and productive, and particularly how some of the federal budget proposals may impact households that are lower income. And let's start off with the SNAP program. SNAP is supplemental nutrition, so what we typically call food stamps. The 2019 federal budget proposal is looking at a 27.4% decrease to current SNAP benefits for low-income households. So, give you a little bit of background. Currently, households need to be at or below 138% of the federal poverty level to qualify for food stamp benefits. And then the amount of benefits given to a family really depends on what kind of assets they have, how many people are in their family, obviously, and what their income looks like. But it's a sort of general rule of thumb that those benefits come out to about $1.40 per person per meal. So you can do a little bit of math in terms of what that looks like when you're feeding a family. I know, for example, last week met with a community member who's in their mid-80s, living on $715 a month of Social Security benefits. Their current SNAP food benefits are $80 a month. So it's not a lot of money, and we are looking at a big cut there. There's also something really interesting in the federal budget proposal that I had not seen before, which is right now and historically, those SNAP benefits come in the form of a voucher, or actually it's a debit card that gets recharged every month. And people can take that to the grocery store and buy the food items of their choice. You can't buy alcohol, you can't buy cigarettes, but basically you use it the way you would a debit card. What the government's proposing is a rehaul of that system, where most food benefits would be delivered to people in prepackaged USDA food packages. I know, that was something I learned just looking into this. So we're looking not only at proposed big cuts, but also a real change to how those benefits are delivered and the amount of choice people have, and a shift over to a much higher increase of sort of shelf-stable foods being given to people. I want to compare that to what's going on right here in our community, so we don't get too upset about that. And again, these are proposed cuts. I think the chances of all of these things really getting through are slim, but they definitely impact the budget that gets put out there. Right now, like I mentioned, our SNAP benefits not only allow for the purchase of food, but one thing that people don't realize is they also allow for the purchase of seeds and plants if people want to grow their own produce. So that's something we want to make sure people know. In our community, the food bank continues to be very heavily utilized, particularly in winter months when more people have reduced work hours. So that's a real safety net for a lot of families in our community, and increasingly a lot of single retired people as well, who are living on a fixed income simply because the cost of food out here is higher than on the mainland. We also have some really great local initiatives popping up. The first thing that I'm super excited about is a program called 36 Weekends. I don't know if anyone's heard about that, or if anyone knows Michelle Beckfed, who's a real go-getter. Michelle put together this program and is partnering with Kings Market and the San Juan Island School District. And 36 Weekends is going to provide weekend food backpacks for elementary school-age kids who are on free and reduced lunch, to ensure that families on those programs have adequate nutrition through the weekends. It's being funded by Rotary of San Juan Island, United Way, and some private donors. So it will be piloted this coming fall. They're looking for volunteers. It's a great program. It's a program that's similar to one that's been done on Orcas very successfully over the past few years, as well as in other parts of the country. So we're really excited to see that program get launched, and it will be focused on providing good, nutritious food to elementary school age kids. Hopefully, if it goes well, it's something that then we'll work towards seeing enacted during the summer months as well. Because right now, I think I mentioned almost 40% of kids at the elementary school are on either free or reduced lunch. The other thing that's happening that's really great is San Juan County Health and Community Services is doing a fantastic job of really looking at the quality of food that people in our community have access to. And they have been going after and obtaining grant funds to essentially double people's food stamp benefits and allow them to be spent at places like the farmers market, local co-ops, even farm stands, to really increase access to very healthy, nutrient-dense food. And piggybacking onto that, Seroptimus does a great job, once again this summer, of providing some extra food benefits to senior women who are on fixed incomes to use those benefits as well. So, I think we're really approaching this proposed decrease with a lot of great, high-quality, innovative programs that speak to not only, a need for good quality food, but also our communities need to support local agriculture and make sure that people can access the nutrition that they need. Housing is another area. The 2019 federal budget proposal is looking at around a 20% decrease to funding for Section 8 subsidized housing, and all told about a $2.6 billion cut to rental assistance programs and Section 8 vouchers, which provide low-income housing. Another thing they're proposing is that for people who are in subsidized Section 8 housing, currently the expectation is that if you're low income and you qualify for that subsidized housing, you're expected to pay 30% of your income toward rent. The proposal also looks at increasing that to 35% of your income toward rent. And it's also proposing to completely eliminate the National Housing Trust Fund, which rehabilitates housing for low-income families. So again, looks pretty bleak. On the other hand, our community here is doing a lot of great stuff. As Duncan mentioned, affordable housing, or lack of affordable housing continues to be a crisis out here, sort of across the board. But I wanted to share some other information. Our point-in-time homeless count this year saw the homeless population decrease slightly from 154 to 120 people. This year, they noted 57 people living outdoors, or without basic things like drinking water, access to being able to bathe, cook, etc., and 63 people in the county who were at high risk for homelessness, living in very temporary, couch surfing situations in a car or something like that. So we did see that number go down just slightly. We have an amazing San Juan County Housing Advisory Committee that are, they're working really hard. They have significantly increased emergency rental assistance funds to all 3 of the family resource centers in the county, so that we're able to help households who have temporary financial crises with a little more rental assistance. That's, from our perspective, the most important thing we can do is for families that are housed, making sure they're able to stay in their home, because if they lose their home, there's not going to be anywhere to go other than off island. So, and the San Juan Island Community Foundation has also been really generous in kicking in grant funding for emergency rental housing. So we've seen a big increase in support for those programs. It sounds like next month you're going to be talking about the real estate excise tax, but I would definitely encourage everybody to read San Juan County's Affordable Housing Work Group Strategic Action Plan ahead of that meeting. It gives, Ryan Page from the county did just an amazing job of compiling a lot of information about the current state of housing here. And I think that's great background information as you consider the real estate excise tax.
Available online.
Available online, yes. So, and just a couple things about that real estate excise tax. Obviously, the Family Resource Center is a big supporter of it. We'd like to see people stably housed. It's looking a lot of innovative solutions and really looking not just at very low-income families, but moderate-income families as well. And it would be projected to raise about $1.2 million annually to go toward affordable housing. And one of the critical things about that is that 1.2 really allows our county to leverage that funding and bring in other sources of funding as well. So for about every dollar of money raised through that tax, we're looking at about potentially $4 of other government and private funding that would go along with it. There's also a great website called yesforhomes.net if you want to read a little background information. Moving on, one program I think I talked about last year was Low-Income Household Energy Assistance Program, which is a federally funded program that provides very low-income households with heating assistance every winter. In 2018, that was up for complete elimination in the federal budget. It did not get eliminated. It's still up for elimination this year. We're just going to go ahead and plan that it will still be around. It's unlikely that Congress would actually eliminate it, but that is something that is, on the chopping block potentially. Aside from that, children's programs, which are always a big focus of what the Resource Center does. Federal funding for that is we're looking at mostly decreases, cuts to juvenile justice programs. There are not proposed cuts to Head Start, which is a critical provider of early childhood support services in our community. There's an increase of 1% for 2019, so it doesn't really keep pace with the rate of inflation, but no cuts proposed. However, there is a call for the elimination of what's called a Social Security block grant, and that's about $1.6 billion in funding for social services for children, including child care, child abuse prevention advocacy, transitional services for kids coming out of foster care, etc. So again, on a local level, we're fortunate to have just an amazing juvenile justice department here in our county that's doing a lot of really great, innovative, trauma-informed work with kids. I encourage everybody to get out to the Family Umbrella Group luncheon. It's been postponed until this fall, but they do a wonderful job of raising preschool scholarship funds for working families in the community to ensure that every child who needs to be in preschool can be in preschool. So we continue to have just a lot of great grassroots community efforts that I think will certainly mitigate the potential impact of some of these federal cuts. So we'll just hold steady and do what we always do, and hopefully things will be okay.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Sarah, an audience request, could we have the blind on that window drop? It's hard looking into the light.
Yes, you can. If I can figure it out, we'll do it. Or maybe Wayne will do it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. We thought it wasn't going to be highly impactful, but clearly it is.
It's the reverse of shedding light on things. I guess in talking about my role, I'm not sure. Lex and I are kind of two sides of a coin, I suppose. But in talking about environmental issues, I never know quite where to start when I look at what's happening. So trying to focus on some of the positive things first. I'm always grateful that I live here, first of all, that we have some great progressive programs. The land bank, we've got the San Juan Preservation Trust, which does a lot of great conservation work also. And we have some great partners, state parks, county parks, Federal National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife, State Fish and Wildlife, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Did I miss anybody? Probably. Yeah. Well, we've got a great organization here called the Terrestrial Managers Group, where we actually sit down and coordinate and try and find synergies. And Lex is going to tell you a little bit about a project that we did. I'm skipping over that. But Washington State also is a pleasure to live in by comparison to some other places. I guess what I'm seeing is kind of this stark divide between red states and blue states in terms of how we do things. So we're fortunate to be in a state where some of these things are still considered to be important. We spend money on these things, on pollution control and zoning and conservation, and that continues. So that's all really good. I think once you get out of that, the picture gets a lot darker. And oh, sorry, I thought you wanted to ask a question. And when I think about environmental issues, I think about different categories. And the basic thing that's important here is the fact that the environment is the planet's life support system. So it's kind of, without that, we have nothing, literally. And when you think about the planet's life support system and what's happening, a number of issues jump to the fore. Climate change, in particular, is one. Obviously, I don't even know where to start on federal response to climate change at this point. It seems to be, frankly, every day is like a opposite day, where you know what the right thing is to do, but you do the opposite. That seems to be the world we live in. So not addressing climate change is really going to be a very critical issue for us as we see things really start to pick up. We've already seen quite a bit of impacts from it. Seeing precipitation changes, droughts, more fires, growing seasons going out of cycle. There's just a lot that's kind of going sideways here, and obviously our federal government is not doing a whole lot to address it. In fact, I would say we're kind of trying to do the reverse. One example of that would be in the previous administration we had a clean power initiative, which was basically about retiring coal-fired power plants and replacing them with renewable energy or other sources of energy. And we've now gone to a policy where we're basically looking to subsidize coal. And really it's quite interesting, actually. So the federal government is using Cold War era statutes. At this point, they're looking at ordering grid operators to purchase power from coal-fired power plants and nuclear plants. Kind of interesting. The flip side of that part of it, of the climate change piece, is that there's only so much you could do to actually hold back the tide of environmental progress. And yes, you can do something like this, but the reality is what's happened in terms of power generation in this country is that we've seen progressively coal becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. It doesn't mean we're not still digging it, doesn't mean we're not still shipping it to other places, but in terms of a percentage of power that's used in energy production, it's been dropping, and it will continue to drop, really because it just doesn't compete economically, frankly. So you can do these things to try and prop up a failing industry, but the reality is we know where that's going, and we're going to get there. It's just a question of how quickly we can do it. Going on to another issue of pollution, another great reason to live in San Juan County. We're blessed in that we don't live in a place which is heavily polluted. I, for a number of years, worked in New Jersey on toxics issues. It's not like that here, I can tell you. And one of the recent developments in that regard is extremely disturbing. The Environmental Protection Agency, which seems to, I just don't know where to start, but in this case, what they've proposed, the way the EPA has regulated toxic chemicals has been problematic for years and years. The industry has created new substances, many new substances. There are probably 80,000 synthetic organic chemicals out there. The number that we regulate is minimal, really. And in the Obama administration, there was an attempt to try and transform the way that was done, to really take a closer look and to require industry to actually more closely examine some of these substances before they start producing them and they get released into the environment. Well, under the EPA, in addition to the overall elimination of science and scientific standards, one of their new ideas is in testing these chemicals, basically they're eliminating the requirement to look at impacts on soil contamination or air contamination or water contamination. The only thing they're looking at is direct consumption, basically, in the workplace, and that's the standard they're proposing to use. So quite troubling. Not sure what to say about that. We do, there again though, I would say that something interesting has happened, that you have the states which they're allowed to have stricter standards than the federal government. And so here again, places like California where they have much stronger standards, they're basically assuming the leadership role on these issues now. Just like we see in climate change, where states are trying to deal with climate change issues because there's that void at the federal level. But another problematic issue there. Getting into conservation, one of the things that's been very disturbing has been the administration's push to reduce the size of national monuments. And they've only done 2 so far, but there are others on the list. And it's disturbing also, in this context, for the San Juan Islands National Monument, which we worked really hard to get to ensure that we had permanent protection for the 1,000 acres of BLM properties in the county. To see the next administration come along and basically pretty much threaten to undo that. Our national monument appears to be safe, by the way. We're not significant enough, I think, to really register, which is good. But in some of these other places where you've had the Bears Ears and Grand Staircase, Escalante National Monuments, Grand Staircase was reduced by 50%. Bears Ears was reduced from 1.3 million acres down to 228,000, so 15% remains of what was designated. And this feeds back into this whole kind of climate change picture, because the rationale for reducing those acreages is to allow for more commercial or extractive development. We do have plenty of that, actually. There are hundreds of millions of acres which are under lease or under control by the Bureau of Land Management for extractive energy production. There's a lot of it out there. A lot of it goes unused because it's just not economically viable. So the idea of making more capacity really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's just a pure political tactic, basically. But coming back to the good news part of this too, even though what we've seen in this administration is appointment of questionable officials, either corrupt or incompetent, I think I can say that freely, honestly, or positions that just go unfilled, hundreds, thousands of positions that just go unfilled, with the idea really of reducing the effectiveness of federal agencies. It's troubling, and coupling that with their tax policies, which basically are about transferring wealth from government to corporations and private individuals. So the overall focus is to try and break the effectiveness of government. It's not as easy as it looks. So there's still lots of good people in federal agencies. There's still a lot of nonprofit organizations which watch all of this closely, and they go to court and they stop a lot of this from happening. There's a good bit of inertia, which is basically what's saving us from a lot of the more destructive impacts of these policies. And so we're kind of in a waiting game, really. But I do have confidence that most of what we've done will be difficult to undo, particularly in only 4 years. So hopefully we'll have another cycle and transition back around. In the meantime, look around you, be grateful for what you have, be grateful for this state, and we've got an election coming up. I think you all kind of know what to do.
I just moved it. Okay, I'm going to be positive because I'm a positive person. Maybe I have my blinders on, but my name's Alexis Freedy. I've been here for about 2.5 years. Echoing what everybody has said, this really is a remarkable place to live and to work. And after spending 15 years in Yosemite working a lot on kind of tragedy of the commons, and loving places to death, I had no idea that a lot of that experience would really serve me well in my role coming up to the San Juan Islands. We've worked as the terrestrial managers with the county council. I think building partnerships and collaboration at the local level is really what is so important. And I think that's also, the Park Service is faring quite well, even in our budget cycle. I feel a little guilty even saying this, but we've received more money from Congress than we requested. So I think the idea of public lands, maybe not all, but a lot, and the national park system is still a very it's got a lot of bipartisan support, and we are absent of a lot of key positions that are being filled, but I kind of chalk that up to there are so many incredibly dedicated and passionate people working for the national park system, for the state park system, for even local county parks that love what they do, that we're just going to keep doing what we do, and whatever's happening in Washington, when something happens, we'll know about it. But in terms of what we do at the local level, I think we're still moving in the right direction. The Department of Interior does have a strategic plan for this 4 years, and some of the things that resonate with me that I think really bode well for us at the local level is a focus on strengthening local investment in public land management and growing partnerships. There's also a lot within the Department of Interior to increase access for recreational opportunities. And I think we have a fair amount of recreational opportunities that are happening out in the San Juan Islands that have a lot of local support. So for me, I feel like some of the challenges that I'm seeing now that I've been here long enough to maybe kind of finally catch my breath and get my feet underneath me is that I think the park has not been as friendly maybe to the community as it could have been. I've gotten a lot of good feedback from folks, and I'm really looking at opportunities and ways with a lot of our new staff. We've been in the process of rebuilding a park. When I arrived, we were pretty decimated in terms of key positions, many people who had been working in the park for over 10 years. And that's an incredible amount of institutional knowledge to lose. coupled with some archaic business practices. I don't have file drawers to mine to find out what happened 15 years ago with certain things. So some of this is just learning as we go. But I think rebuilding the park with people who are enthusiastic and have a lot of passion and great ideas is really kind of helping us on a trajectory to be a very friendly and engaging, I think, federal agency. We're trying to do new things. We started a music down by the bay at English Camp. It wasn't very well advertised, but every Saturday in June from 6 to 7:30, we're doing a little mini concert series. So it's kind of an example of how can we expand people's relationship with the park. There's a lot of clearly local residents who use the park day in and day out for their favorite thing, and we have 2 million people came out to the San Juan Islands on the ferry last year. We learned this in a visitor capacity survey that Lincoln mentioned. Part of what we've been trying to do as the terrestrial managers group is to figure out what are people coming here for, where are they going, what are they doing, how are they dispersing, and how are we as a community preparing ourselves to either receive all of these people and have high quality visitor experiences. That's kind of been the challenge that Yosemite's had for the last 40 years, and we still can't figure out how to. It's so politically charged. It's such an iconic place that, from my perspective, I think the San Juan Islands are still in a very unique place where we're still kind of in control of our future, and we have an opportunity to really define what sustainable tourism and recreation out here looks like amidst all the other challenges that the community is facing. With that growing visitation, something that had struck me kind of early on was, well, if I can't find housing for our staff, I mean, we have staff members, not all who own houses or even were here. We bring seasonal staff in, we bring volunteers in, and if people, my first summer here, I had people living in trailers with no running water, and I felt like I was exploiting my employees, and I made a decision at that point to basically start taking 10% of the park's budget. We have a little more over $1 million. The benefit of the national park system is every national park unit is a line item budget item, so Congress's Green Book. Unlike the BLM, where the state offices get money and they kind of like flesh it out to the individual units, we are fortunate enough to have a little bit more prediction, I guess, when it comes to our annual budget. And for the last 2 years now, I've kind of made the executive decision to spend close to 10% of our annual budget just on securing employee housing for our staff. And what does that mean? That means less work in the field. It means less interpretive programming. It's less monitoring of key resource issues, but it feels like it's something that needs to happen in order to keep the park afloat. Just briefly, so we have probably 6 new people that have come to the park just within the last year and a half, which I don't feel like I'm doing 3 jobs anymore, considering this is my first superintendency and there's really not a great handbook for how to do this job, and I find there's things I don't know every day that I run the risk of getting in trouble for. So it's nice to have some more people here. The budget looks good now that we finally have it, about 9 months into the fiscal year, and we have the 2-year spending budget. So we're in a tough spot with getting money so late in the fiscal year, or having confidence that it kind of trips you up in terms of what you can confidently invest in early on, and then everything happens this time of year. So we've taken some risk, and we're prepared for this summer, and it's going to work out. One of the things that I inherited upon arriving was a new visitor center for American Camp, which we're in the process of designing, and we're going to have a public engagement process this summer. It's going to be a multi-million-dollar investment for the park. Park has been operating out of a double-wide trailer for the last 41 years, and we've been fighting tooth and nail for every little penny, but it'll be nice to give this National Historic Landmark a visitor center that it deserves. So we'll be out at the fair this summer with all the plans, so please stop by and see us. We're excited that gives us and the island a platform to really share the history of the islands in a much more robust way than we've been able to. We're nearing completion also on a group campsite up at English Camp. If you haven't walked down the administrative access road between the maintenance building and the parade grounds lately, I would encourage you to take a stroll. We've been, since the Westcott Bay and Mitchell Hill acquisition and the old Oregon Museum of Science and Industry camp, the OMSI camp that was a little closer to the parade grounds, it was called to move kind of farther up the hill and out of the swampy area so it could be used year-round, and we're close to finishing that group campsite. It's going to have a commercial kitchen, a covered pavilion, about 10 tent pads, and the goal is really to provide an education outdoor space for youth and other partnership groups. I think we're also interested in finding ways for commercial tour operators to offer overnight camping experiences. So if you are involved with a group or want to do a retreat there, just know that we're slowly building some more infrastructure that might allow for people to spend the night in the park and have some more meaningful overnight experiences. Briefly, the Island Marble Butterfly, you probably heard a little bit about it. It's been something that the Park Service, along with numerous conservation partners, has been working on for many, many years. And as of the 12th of April, it was proposed listing on the endangered species list. A lot of the critical habitat is proposed inside of American Camp. Part of what I've been trepidatious as one of many conservation partners to kind of step out in front and start saying, what do we think about this? Because it's with so many different partners, it's sometimes hard to understand the jurisdictional mosaic that is being woven, but I intend to try to do some more outreach with folks, and answering basic questions like, well, what does critical habitat in the entirety of American Camp landscape mean for me walking my dog? And you still can do that, and really what we're going to work towards is hopefully some permanent habitat protection. But it's been a real big focus for the park for many years. The foxes and the photographers, you probably saw some buzz about that this spring. We have once again kind of not been as prepared as we thought we were. Last spring it got a little chaotic, but this year was really off the charts in terms of what we were prepared to do, with no law enforcement and none in the foreseeable future, and the sheriff's department being pretty taxed. There's not a lot of support out here for kind of like the resource violation type of code enforcement. And so our approach has really been education and just getting people out there roving, trying to help people understand that the interaction that they may be having with the foxes are a little unhealthy. When you've got people surrounding the den and feeding, like trying to bait them with hot dogs, it's gone too far, right? So, and I guess my perspective is, I think our park has really focused it's been too concentrated of a focus on the history. And there's been a lot of I don't want to say missed opportunity, because I think there's still time to do things about it, but we're trying to transform a more holistic approach to the park management and recognizing that the American Camp landscape and the Gary Oak habitat up at English Camp, those are rare ecosystems, and we need to do a better job at being a lot more proactive in managing some of those areas. So heroin use at South Beach is on the rise. So, it's things that our maintenance staff over the last year has started to see more indication of drug use down at South Beach. And during the Great Islands cleanup this year, afterwards we were approached by Peace Health. The medical staff said, hey, we think there's a problem down there, and maybe we could work together on an education and a safety awareness campaign. So I think with that one of the things I was asking the sheriff's department when I first got here was, I said, okay, this place has a pretty shiny exterior. What's really going on out here in the San Juan Islands? And I didn't really get a lot, but I do think it's important to really be vigilant and realize that there's a lot of things happening in front of our eyes that we don't always see. And open spaces and recreation areas are often sometimes where people are doing all sorts of stuff that they're not supposed to, or illegally, and safety-wise, just to be aware of probably. And I have no ground to really speak to this, but obviously this community is changing. There's probably been a lot of change here over the decades, but I think with the urban population centers and people continuing to come out here, all of those big city problems, they always come here too. And the national park system is pretty used to dealing with some really weird things that happen out in the wilderness. And I think we need to be paying attention to those things and looking for them. And so that's been a pretty disturbing kind of realization, I guess, for me. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that we are, one of our goals is to really bolster our relationships with the tribal communities. And last year, well, we've had a series of events, but last year we, along with Audlin Park over on Lopez, hosted a canoe journey landing. We're going to be doing that again this summer. There's a lot of programming and things that are going on in the park, but just to kind of note that is an important, we are stewarding our ancestral territory, and the more I work with the nations, there's so much healing and so much bridge building that has to be done, and we have to start making small steps, and sometimes just making people feel comfortable that they can come out here and not be afraid is a big step forward. And so we had over 300 people showing up and camping in the park last year for canoe journey, and I think we'll continue. So I have no idea if that was even what you wanted me to cover, but that's kind of what came to mind about what's going on in the park.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and these days I'm glad to be anywhere.
We're glad you're here.
So, outlook on healthcare. You can't avoid politics, and so I'll touch on a little bit of that. And as to the outlook, it's a political question, and midterms are coming up, and the 20 elections are coming up, and we got to change things quick. This is in the library. This is my last little Thomas Paine pamphlet on where we are in the 2018 Congress and healthcare at a crossroads. I came into medicine out of UC San Francisco in 1960, so it goes way back. I've been in rural practice for 13 years, including 6 years in Mount Shasta, and was there when Medicare and Medicaid came in, which was seamless, by the way. It worked just great, despite what we hear today from the opposition. And practiced here until 97, but since then I really have full time to. My passion is to look at the whole system and how can it be better, and whether we like it or not. Here we are on an island, a remote island, and we're part of the system. Life Care Center of America went away with 2 or 3 weeks notice, 35 patients there. As 90% of those are for-profit chains. This was a for-profit chain as well. What they do is they come in and they chop the heck out of nursing staff. They cut budgets all over the place, and when they aren't making enough money, they just leave. So here we have a huge void in this community. No convalescent center. I'm not too optimistic about. There is a task force. I'm not too optimistic that will come back anytime soon. They're dependent on Medicaid funding, and we know about what's happening in Medicaid. So I'm going to try and just touch on a few things. I spent the morning with Bruce Conway, I'm working on a new book on Trump Care. Hope to have it out in September before the midterms. And it's about the lies, the broken lies, and how Trump Care will fail. Well, what it is, how it'll fail, and what we need to do about it, which, if you've heard me before, it's we need Medicare for everyone, and we need national health insurance, and we can pay for it. Healthcare is a right, and we have a shambles right now. Healthcare is more politicized than it's ever been since I've been in this. So let me just touch on several things, and I'll have to start right out with politics because the Trump administration has sabotaged the Affordable Care Act in many, many ways. I won't go into them all. You're familiar with most of them, I'm sure. And the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, wasn't the answer to all our problems anyhow. There are still 29 million uninsured and tens of million underinsured. And even with that, everything's going to get worse as the Trump administration takes apart Health and Human Services as other institutions. So it's really a pretty desperate situation. I want to spend a few moments about the safety net because we don't have much of a safety net in the country for health care, and including on this island. As a member of the Board of Health here the last few years, we've been dealing with some of that. And Barbara here has been very involved with that. But even right here, we have, even though we have for 5 years, we've had our critical access hospital, Peace Health, but they don't do a bunch of things, especially Planned Parenthood. And we had to fight to get some of the budget back from this 50-year contract with Peace Health that never went to a vote. Some of it back to cover Planned Parenthood. I can tell you that 50% of deliveries each year are with Medicaid patients on this island. And so prenatal care is an issue. Transportation costs thereof, everything else. Family planning is a big issue. Planned Parenthood, Trump administration trying to wipe that out, etc. So the system right now under Trump Care, which by the way I'm having a great time finding quotes that are just so absurd lies, and I sprinkle them through the book, and it's really quite a bit of fun because there are 2,000 or 3,000 now lies in total, and a bunch of them deal with healthcare. So anyhow, it's a political moment where we can do something about it, and the big issue is continue with Trump Care, which the GOP will push, though many of the GOP are getting all worried now because with the midterms coming up, they have to go home, and the insurer rates will get announced about August and September, October, and already we have some in Virginia going up 90% next year, and so it's a really big deal. So congressional Republicans are going to have to worry about that now. And the latest poll by Wall Street Journal and NBC News, the first few days of June right now, healthcare is number one issue in the minds of the electorate. Number one, above the economy. So it's a huge issue, and it's a political battle coming up. But let me just touch on what we've got now, which is fodder for doing something about it. This is from a chapter that I worked with Bruce Conway, and we worked all morning on chapter 14 of the Trump Care book. And whether you look at access, which is just terrible and getting worse, like 32 million uninsured next year, tens of million underinsured. $28,000 is the average that a family of four will spend now on insurance and health care, $28K. The median household income in the U.S. is $59K. This doesn't fit. So affordability is way, way off. What we have is mergers of big corporate entities, be they health insurers or hospital systems, and they're all in this big game where they own the docks. 2/3 of the docks in the country are employed now, mostly by hospital systems, and they're pressured to raise more revenue, and they're pressed to fill out the little electronic record, which is a billing instrument. See? So that's what's going on. Healthcare has been commodified. It's a big industry. It's 18% of the GDP. All kinds of people getting left out. We have a healthcare divide in this country between those states which are mostly in the South, mostly red, and the West Coast is progressive. New England is too, and some of the Midwest. But huge divide, disparity in healthcare outcomes and access to care. So it's really a big, bad deal. Mental health is terrible under this administration. We've criminalized that. All kinds of mentally ill people in jails that get no treatment. We have a very unstable system, and it's a war between the insurers and the government. The government keeps bailing them out, and Trump is too. And Trump says he wants to cut drug prices, but he doesn't. He could easily say, let's have Medicare negotiate drug prices. No, he won't do that. So he postures like he'll do something, but he never does. So it's a political problem right now, and challenge. We have good news in that we have more women running for Congress. We have more progressive women running for Congress. We have more groups in the Democratic Party working for, let's say, national health care in the platform. It's still not in the party platform. It is for progressive Democrats, but not for the centrist ones. So the Democrats are kind of at war within themselves, just like the Republicans are. So it's really open to what will happen. I think healthcare would be a huge issue in the midterms, and I think there's good chance the Democrats can retake the House in 2018. I hope, and I think it'll happen. And then what happens in the Senate is a question, but it's all we're totally part of the system whether we want to or not. I don't think some states try to build their own national or state health insurance thing, like California and Vermont and a few others. I don't think that'll work because you'd have to get all the federal monies from all these different agencies that don't talk to each other into the state and say this is our budget for health care. But that's not going to happen. So I think we need federal legislation. We're odd country out. Almost all civilized countries, Western Europe, Scandinavia, all over, New Zealand, Australia, Taiwan, around the world have national health insurance. It's time we should. So that's enough. I'm the last one here. You've been sitting a long time, so let's go to questions.
Thank you all very much for your remarks. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's your opportunity. Do I have questions? Yes, Laura Jo.
I have a real simple one for Duncan. I go to a lot of meetings, and there's not a lot of room to go to a meeting, like the County Water Resources Committee or something, and we all meet in the upstairs room at the old fire station. And that's not, having more and more trouble getting up those stairs. Is there any opportunity to put in an elevator or to build or procure a handicapped accessible meeting room?
Well, there's expenditures that we made. Most of the meetings that are held up there are not town related. We're getting the room up, we don't charge for it. We think that having the different organizations that need to meet, we're happy to let them go up there. No one has come forward to make any improvements. We're going to be doing some remodeling on the building. Coming up about 2 years, we're going to be expanding the offices. We have no plans for an elevator because you'd have to be building it into the middle of what will be future workspace. What we could do is we could look into putting in one of those chair lifts like they have over at the Whale Museum, where you can sit and ride up. There's a landing at the top, so it'll be difficult, but we can certainly look into it. It's under the no good deed goes unpunished theory, is that because so many people have found it to be a popular place, now we have to pay for the improvements as well. But really, you're right. We have no way to get people up there, and we can't put in an elevator, but we probably could look into getting some sort of a riding lift. And that's a good comment.
Claire?
This is for Duncan also. I hope you all aren't feeling left out, but I'm sure you'll have questions too. Let me start out by saying I love the roundabout. I really do. And
That's one.
Yes, and what I wanted to ask is, what have you heard from other people, both local people and tourists? The thing that I think is good about it, that kind of an intersection is exactly the kind of place that calls for something like a roundabout, because it was so screwy and unclear, especially to tourists, as to what to do there. So what have you heard from other people, like I say, both locals and tourists, and where did you get the money to do it?
Okay, what I've heard, the best day of my life was going on the art tour last weekend when I went around, because 5 separate people, without being asked, came up to me and very quietly said, I was really against the roundabout, but I love it. And that was like 5 again, that was in one day. I think what I've heard generally is everybody is liking it, they see the potential of it. They wish it was a different color. They wish it was a different color. They wish it was a different color. We will be pulling out those Jersey barriers and building a raised sidewalk with a railing on it. So that will be coming in, and also relocating the ADA curb ramps to where they should be. That's the next phase, and that should be coming up in the next couple of months. For the most part, everyone that liked roundabouts liked it, and those that didn't like it, there's a number of them and have changed their mind about it. So that's really encouraging.
Yeah.
Which is kind of...
The cost was $92,000, and we took that from our transportation benefit district monies. You pay an extra 2.2 on your sales tax, and that's what we use for road and street projects.
There were a lot of people against brickworks too when that was proposed, and a lot of those people are people we see every Saturday at brickworks, so I think people come around. There was a question over here. Audra?
This is a question for everybody on the panel.
And Audra, you have a soft voice. Could you stand up,
I
please?
have to tell you, you all know so much. I'm sitting here with the head just crammed with things I want to remember and think about, and so I appreciate that. But my question for you right now is, given, quickly say, what is the one most important thing you would like us to take away today, saying, hey, this is where to take an action? And I realize there are probably 10, but if you could just grab at one that strikes you as pretty important right now, that would be a help.
And since this question was for everybody, I'll ask everybody to answer, but since Duncan's been in the hot seat, let's start with you, John, and then we'll just work our way this way. What would you like us, the audience, to take away from your remarks today?
All of us have to inform ourselves of the 2 main options in healthcare, which is local and national. And it's, do we continue Trump care, or do to go for Medicare for all.
Okay.
And the public, over 40 years, a majority have been for Medicare for all.
Thank you. Alexis?
I think there are probably very few national park units that have ever been created without the locals making something happen. And the local support of public lands, and the land bank, the work that the Preservation Trust is doing, the work that the state parks are doing. There's still a land and water conservation fund available to acquire more lands for conservation. So to me, I think it's important to recognize the value of the local public lands within the San Juan Islands, support the organizations that are trying to do good conservation work, and recognize the health benefits and the spiritual and the stress relief benefits that public lands really provide, and support us in our efforts to do the best that we can with the funding that we have to make them enjoyable and accessible for as many people.
Thank you. Lincoln?
I would say just pick an issue. Is it climate change? Is it conservation? Is it pollution control? There are lots of organizations who are working on those issues. Find one, support them, and
And don't worry about the ones you're not then supporting.
And, as I said, there's an election coming up.
Jennifer?
And I would say this year, support the real estate excise tax, because I know all the funding we put into every social service program, it's not going to do much good if people don't have a stable place to live. So, it's pretty basic.
Duncan?
I'm going to zig a little bit on this one. Kindness is really in short supply right now. One of the lessons I give to all the new council members and mayors that come on board is I sit them down, I said, never, ever, ever make a statement when a question will do. So, when you get into situations, whether it's online or talking with your friends, always form it in the form of a question, because then if you are completely off base, you will learn something and you can bow out of it gracefully. But once you make a statement, you take your feet and you plant them. So as we go into this next year, just remember, ask more questions and make less statements. And that's my statement.
And a good one it is, too. And it's completely in tune with what the League believes, which is we believe in civil discourse and a free and fair exchange of ideas. Another question? Beverly?
Mr. Wilson, when you were speaking of affordable housing, were you including rental, or was it just to buy?
Oh, rental.
Rental,
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
You need to be able to walk before you can run, and we need to have we have so many people that need just a place to call their own and housing. But most definitely, some of the projects we're working on right now are all involved around rentals.
Good.
Nothing wrong with the ownership, but we need more rentals. That's where our shortage is.
And I think that's what everything we've talked about is depending on, is finding a good place to live. Thank you.
And the county has been incredibly cooperative in the process of finding housing, even though some of it may be built in the town. So they are well on board, and they've been great partners in this process.
Come over to Lopez.
Mo?
I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about growth, because it seems like all the issues we're talking about are going to sit on top of how much growth the county can support, whether it's health or social services or access to land or just how we house everyone. So just the thoughts of, since we're dependent on the ferry system and the ferry is going to sort of restrict what can happen here, how much growth can we support realistically?
Who would you like to answer that?
Anyone?
I think, Duncan, you better
I'll take a
take that
shot
one.
at that really done. In 15 years ago, our population here was about 2,080 people. Today it's 2,250. So we have a growth of less than 200. over the last 15 years.
That's
In the
Friday-
town,
in
in the
Friday
town,
Harbor.
and it's in Friday Harbor. So
Right.
from our standpoint is that we're not, and then you look at Seattle, which has probably grown by 25% over that same period of time. So our growth level is not so, if growth is from living in the place, we have lots of places yet to develop. We still seem to have resources which we can tap. However, a lot of people refer to the tourism when you talk about growth. I would like to see us not grow any more in tourism than we are right now during the summer months, because it gets to a point where we are straining our infrastructure, both people and more traditional infrastructure, including water and sewer. But how much more growth can we take? We probably need to have some amount of growth just to grow out the housing stock, so that we can take care of what needs to happen here, because those needs are going to happen. We have to have somewhere to put them. So that's just my opinion. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, when we've looked at projections for actual population growth, it's very, very slow. But I think the thing we need to really look at is that our population is shifting, and we're going to have a much older population in the next 30 years. And that's going to be a big difference, and I think we really need to be looking now at, all the array of services that let people age out here in a way that's healthy and gives them choices. So we have a lot of work to do in that area.
Gay?
This is for Lincoln and really all of you, especially Jennifer, you just brought up the balance is so important. And whether we have a huge wave of tourists in the summer, how do we shift that slightly? How do we bring new, younger families here? What kinds of employment can we bring in? And then you've got the impact of the coal industry and what was described as a roundabout around the San Juan Islands. Originally, I don't know if Lovel's here, but she's spoken to that quite articulately. And how can we look at some of these big shifts and open up different possibilities as we go through the years and accommodate the different aging and the different nuclear, solar, Opalco's efforts versus the natural, for instance.
That was sort of, were you directing that at any particular person?
But then I realized Jennifer was kind of answering it also, and Duncan has addressed it in terms of tourism and
Lincoln, would you like to weigh in?
I'm not sure how to answer that question, actually, but, well, let's see, I'll give it a shot. In terms of the coal issue, I don't know that has to do with growth at all, honestly. The coal issue is really just about what we want to happen in this archipelago, basically, and trying to control the potential for disaster as much as we can. Ultimately, that's an issue which economics is going to take care of, basically, as coal goes away. But we're going to have to deal with it in the interim. And I think we're lucky that we've got a strong governor on that issue and a strong state, but, it's facing international pressure. We like to think of Canada as a progressive place. The BC government's been progressive on this issue. The federal government is not. So there are lots of unanswered questions, but I think the critical thing is just to stay strong on it and fight it.
And because many of us are League of Women Voters members, we know about using our voices and taking action. Get on the phone, write the letters, write the emails, act. Tom?
Question for
And then
Jim.
Emily, I think you had a question too, didn't you? But wait a sec, I called Tom first, sorry.
John, do we still live in a democracy? We know that the Russians interfered with the election, and we think some people in this country may have interfered with the election too. So could you comment on the state of a so-called democracy, if you would, please?
I'm sorry, I'm going to enter in on this. I think that's a little bit outside of what we're here to talk about today, Tom.
Really?
Yeah.
And why is that?
Well, because number one, this is the League of Women Voters, and we talk about issues rather than politics per se. And we're here to talk about the influence of the federal legislation and agenda on local issues.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sarah.
Okay, you're making a big fat mistake, but
Well, you could certainly, I'm sure, engage John in that question and conversation after the meeting.
well, I have already.
Okay. Emily, you had a question?
I have a question for Alexis. The national parks have never had any overnight camping, and I'm excited that you're offering this group situation. Could you just describe it a little bit more at English Camp? The other thing that would do would be to have so many, I think, adults as well as kids have never been out in a real, not necessarily wilderness, but something where they're not camped together and they're an official campground. And they're one place to go, and English Camp is a great place to understand what this world is about. But could you just explain that a little bit more? I think it sounds great.
Yeah, I think in classic form, we built a campground before we knew what we were doing to manage it. So next week, no, I think we can manage overnight use inside of the park through permits, through special use permits, through commercial use authorizations. When we start talking about offering camping to the general public, we have an amenity that then we get into the recreation.gov territory and collecting fees. So we're still at the exploratory phase of how could we even partner with the county to manage some of the camping operations? Are there any local cooperating associations that might want to help us out? There are some things that we need to explore to avoid having it be overly bureaucratic. That being said, I think the English Camp group site is a really great opportunity for us to test. We know that so the visitor capacity assessment that we did last summer was a comprehensive visitor study. We did 6 different elements of it, one of which was a ferry survey where we asked qualitative experiential questions to people. And camping, biking, and kayaking were some of the most sought after recreational opportunities out here. So I think all of the terrestrial managers understand that camping is an affordable way to access and to enjoy the San Juan Islands, and so to some degree we're all pretty committed to trying to find more ways to do that. We get calls all the time as where's the campgrounds in American Camp and English Camp, and quite frankly I'm shocked that this park doesn't have overnight accommodations. So I'm going to work towards making the English Camp group site. We'll probably start with educational groups, maybe some of the tour operators will do some programming. We're working with the Seattle YMCA and Camp Orkyla to do specific summer programs. We're also, a lot of the Washington Conservation Corps, a lot of the other young adult crews spend time in the park. So we're trying to make it a place where people can do good work for the island community and have a free and affordable place to stay. By next summer, I think we'll be able to crack open that walnut of how do we make this a viable campground operation that we make available to the public. And then, if it goes well, part of the other maybe pipe dream is to find other camping opportunities even down at American Camp. And I'm not going anywhere for a while, so I'm ready to take the heat. But I think camping inside the national park is something we need to continue exploring more of. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
How many people could actually, like for this summer, if a group wanted to do a retreat?
I think we could hold about 60.
Really?
And we have a commercial kitchen and the pavilion, so it's really set up for large group use. And that would be ultimately, I would love to see people have weddings and reunions or retreats there. It's going to be set up for that. Yeah.
So tell us again exactly how to find this place.
The road from the maintenance building, it's across the road from the maintenance building, you go down that way.
Or you park in the main parking lot and then head towards the Crook House, and then before you go directly to Bell Point, take a right and head up the road. It's about an eighth of a mile.
And so that's the same road that you take when you want to go see the mysterious cave.
which I still don't know where that is.
Before we move on to the next question, I sense a couple of people, or at least one who's about to leave, who I think should be introduced to the group today. Carolyn Jewett and Stephen Brandley are both running for judgeships, and I think that as League members, we should applaud people who are willing to run for public office, and thank you both for attending today. Stand up, Carolyn. Stand up, Stephen. And as some of you may remember, in 2010, with the handing down of the Supreme Court decision on Citizens United, the League was somewhat desperate to interpret this and think about it and talk about it. And Stephen stood up and came and explained to us what the ruling said and what this meant. And we have remembered that for all of these years. Thank you.
That's my pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, and thank you both for coming to the meeting today. And now, back to questions. I think, Louise?
I was just pursuing a question about camping in the place you described. I think you told me at one point there isn't any water or very little water. How are you addressing that?
We do have water. I think it's a matter, the wells at both American Camp and English Camp we don't have them running year round, and we don't really have water storage. So if we did want to pursue more heavy use of the campground, eventually we're probably going to have a water tank there and pump more year round. Otherwise, it would be very costly to connect to the Roach Harbor water system. But that's another option.
There's a little controversy.
Yeah.
Stephen?
I do have a question. If it's off topic, feel free to say so.
As you know, I will.
A couple of you did mention the drug problem. Alexis, he mentioned the evidence of it, and John mentioned it as well. I wondered if you wanted to opine on the severity of the problem in our community and what you would like to see happen at all levels of government to address it. And I know this may not be the exact targeted panel for this, but I'm curious what your thoughts are, especially Jennifer's.
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly it's a problem out here. I don't think it has reached the severity that it has in places like Snohomish, but we're certainly seeing it as a problem. I know one of the things we didn't get to talk about was Washington State's Medicaid Transformation Project, which is really looking at restructuring use of Medicaid funds, and there will be a significant amount of money going toward the opioid crisis. That's a project that involves millions and millions and millions of dollars, and it's moving very quickly, and no one quite knows what the structure of any of it's looking like yet. One of the biggest challenges out here is just getting people space in inpatient treatment facilities, the logistics of transportation, of simply getting a bed. It would be great to have inpatient treatment options out here. Don't know that that's realistic, but one of the most innovative things that I've seen recently in terms of behavioral health is the DeGualich Center in Anacortes that just opened recently that has basically walk-in services. And that whole center was structured because of needing to meet the needs of the opioid crisis. So it seems to be working really well for that community, and is open to community members here as well. If they want to hop on the ferry, that center will actually even give transportation from the ferry to their center. So we need to see way more investment in community centers like that. And again, centers that look at drug use and behavioral health issues in a very holistic way. That's a center that has child care right there, so parents who need treatment can bring their kids if they need to show up for appointments. They will open at 5:30 in the morning to accommodate people before they need to get to work. We really need to get creative and look outside the sort of traditional parameters of treating illness and treating symptoms, and look at that whole person approach.
and just because I mentioned it, I would not claim to know hardly anything about the totality of the issue, but it seems to me like acknowledgement is a big step that needs to be taken, just to recognize that things like this are happening in this community, and I think that there is a reluctance to acknowledge some of this. And part of that too is having the compassion to realize that people who you don't think are, in this example, instance, heroin users are doing heroin, and that revelation about the amount of compassion that's really needed and the steps that need to be taken to ensure that people are safe, and that if there are remnants or people who are encountering those activities know what to do and are safe. So this doesn't seem to be a community that responds really well to enforcement. Kind of that enforcement mentality, like Duncan said, ask questions. I think we have to have a conversation. I think we need to up the conversation space in the community and approach it from a compassionate, educational standpoint. And we need partners to help us do that, because we don't know how to really address drug use. And so that
sounds like a possible program for the League of Women Voters.
That would be wonderful.
Yes. Yes. Eileen.
In connection with the drug problem, then, could you address that where the schools fit in here? Surely, it's a problem for the schools. And, maybe Duncan, before he goes, knows something about the use, the schools and health and...
The schools are a bit out of my, and I want to applaud everybody here that talked about the compassion, because I have to think my first reaction is I'm really angry at all the property crimes and everything that happen around here, which a significant portion of them are related to the drug use. So there's two different sides to this coin. There's the one side which talks about the compassion we all feel for the people and wanting to give them help and all that. But there's also this anger side, and I've got part of it myself, because I'm tired of having my car broken into, or my neighbor's house broken into, or things stolen, or things that aren't safe, or you can't go someplace at night because it's not safe because people are back there. We have to deal with that part, and that's part of the things I have to work on myself, is the anger about this. But there are two sides to it, and anything, I'd be happy from a town standpoint to be involved with it as well, because it's bad out there, and especially inside the town in certain locations. We need to fix it. I'm sorry for being angry about it, but it's personal, and you see it, and it's a problem. And I'm sorry I have to leave. I've had another appointment, and I got to go. But thank you so much.
Laura Jo, did you have a question?
I was just going to tell Duncan, thank you for letting the Red Cross store their stuff in that building.
Thank you, Duncan. All right, does anybody have any more questions? Tom?
I have a non-controversial question.
Excellent, then give forth.
Well, there's been a proposed study on the books for the past 10 years, proposed by the late County Councilor Alan Lichter, to do a carrying capacity study for water in the county to see if we really have enough water to expand at all. And I was on the Water Resources Committee for a while, and they're not going to do it because I think they're probably controlled by the real estate industry, who don't want the study, which will probably show that we can't afford to have any more residences because the water's not there. So how can we get this done?
To whom are you addressing the question?
Well, yeah, Duncan, or anybody. What can we do?
Does anybody, do any of our panelists, excuse me, have any experience with this question or the issue at large?
I'll wade in because it's really non-controversial. Thanks for that.
We all know each other much too well.
Yeah, it's a big issue. I mean, there's a lot that we just don't know about our water supply, our groundwater supply in particular. With surface water, where we have reservoirs, that's pretty well understood. The town, I think, has a clear understanding of what it needs to do to supply water to people. But when we've got lots that are developed, which are developed via exempt wells, we don't have a great idea of what's going on down there. It's our geology does not make that easy. Everyone's kind of drawing water out of some crack in a rock somewhere, and so the idea of, well, how much do you have? It's a tough thing.
But it's doable.
It's doable. I mean, the other issue I think that this leads into is the idea that we kind of have this, it's schizophrenic reaction to the idea of catchment, where we don't really want catchment to facilitate development, and yet that's clearly the best way to go if you're going to allow new development to require catchment systems, because we've got plenty of rainwater. It's really all about capacity. And so requiring that capacity to be built into new construction certainly would help to mitigate potential impacts on the groundwater situation.
And
part of the answer to that we learned at a meeting, the League meeting a couple of months ago, was that the clean water entity in the county, clean water, what was the...
I can't remember.
Well, whatever it is, it used to be stormwater.
Right.
Now it's clean
now
water.
it has a different...
Environmental services and public works, yeah.
And they are, there has been a fee on your tax bill. It's a fee, not a tax, I've been told. And that fee is going to be raised this year. At least it has to go in front of the council and be approved. But the goal of that, in part, and only in part, is to hire a hydrogeologist. And this is what we found out when the head of that agency, that department, came to the League meeting. And part of it is to do an assessment of water availability.
Okay.
So that's what is in the future. But if they approve that, then we have a small leg onto that platform.
And who is they that's going to approve it?
I'm sorry?
Who's going to approve it?
Council.
County
Have to
council?
go in front of the council, yeah.
Well, the only thing I could...
Laura Jo, what's the clean water utility?
Well, that's the new name for it. They combined the Water Resources Committee with the Stormwater Committee, which to me was probably not a good decision, but they didn't ask. Anyway, that's the situation. I think it was more of an administrative thing. It made it look a little easier. One less meeting for somebody to go to.
But
Sorry. They're county committees. And the Stormwater Committee mainly dealt with stuff running down the hill into the water and getting into the water systems and into the people's wells. And then the Water Resources deals with management of wells and the various water systems there are in the county.
So I was very heartened. I'm concerned about the same thing you are, Tom, and I was really heartened that a portion of this, at least it was said in the county informational meetings that they were holding about that. That's the goal. They're going to try to hire a hydrogeologist.
Okay, well,
as part of that.
it has to be done, of course.
Yeah, of course.
The other factor which you might think about is climate change, which is going to be reduced rainfall and higher temperatures, and of course that's all a myth anyway, right? Okay.
On that note, I realize it is 2:25, and we often are followed in here by another meeting, so the League members are going to be shuffling chairs like mad right now. So I'm going to thank our remaining panelists so much for your efforts and your time. And quite obviously, we'll be calling on you again, and so we're saving your nameplates this time instead of having to redo them.
A year later, I'll come back.
And thank you, everybody, for attending this meeting. And please remember, use your voices and encourage people to vote in November. I don't care how you vote, vote. Thank you.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, John.
No, we don't.
I know, and I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to answer that question.
I've got 2 quotes in a chapter I'm working on, this and the next page, which are pretty eloquent.
Starting there?
Yeah.
I'll take a call. No, Louisa. Here, let me take it.
Race and culture, yes.
There. Okay, let me.
Great. Well, when is this coming out?
September.
Let me take care of it.